There's a wonderful story, unbelievable, which is printed in the Sefer Shmuz V'Sipurim. Shmuz V'Sipurim was written by Rabbi Nachman Kahan, the father of Rabbi Yoel. Most of you know Rabbi Yoel Kahan. And his father wrote many stories and he's a Bar Samcha, someone you could rely. In this second volume, he has a story that happened in Krakow. And he heard it from someone who actually read the registry of the Chevra Kadisha in Krakow. And over there they have the following story, that one of the greatest sages in Krakow was the Megala Amukos. The Megala Amukos was approximately 400 years ago, and he was the Rav, and he was also known as a big Rosh Yeshiva. One of his greatest Talmidim was the Shach. The Shach is one of the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, the Sifsei Kohen. He was one of the Talmidim of the Megala Amukos. And the Megala Amukos is buried in Krakow. One day, the person was traveling by in Krakow, a young man, a businessman. He went over to the Gabbai of the Chevra Kadisha, the head of the people who take care of unfortunately when somebody passes away, you go to the Chevra Kadisha, they take care of the cemetery. And he told them that he would like to buy a plot in the cemetery. So the Gabbai said, no problem. And he said, I would like to buy the place which is right next to the Megala Amukos. So the Gabbai Chevra Kadisha says, I'm sorry, you can't buy the place next to the Megala Amukos. You have to be a big tzaddik. You have to be a very special person in order to be buried next to the Megala Amukos. How could you just want to get buried there? So this businessman took out from his pocket a massive amount of money, and he says to the Gabbai, here, take this. And this way, the Gabbai lost himself. He saw so much money, and the fence around the Beis HaChaim, around the cemetery has to be fixed, and some other things need, and then all of a sudden, here's all the money in one shot. And unfortunately, he lost himself, and he told the guy, okay, I'll sell you the place next to the Megala Amukos. And he thought to himself, anyways, this person is a young guy, he's a businessman, he only passed by, he's going to live for many years. Until then, many things can happen. He sold him the place. A few days later, the Chevra Kadisha comes to the Gabbai's house, and they tell him that there's somebody who passed away here in town. So he asked, who? So all of a sudden they tell him this and this name. And all of a sudden it turns out that it's this guy's name. So now the Gabbai didn't know what to do. So he didn't tell anybody the story, and he told them, nah, just bury him, whatever, in the place where they have for all the foreigners, and everything will be fine. And they buried him there. The next night, this guy who got buried there comes to the Gabbai of the Chevra Kadisha in his dream, and he tells him, hey, what's going on over here? We have a deal. I paid you money, and look where you put me. You didn't put me in the... So the Gabbai of the Chevra Kadisha answers him, no, what would you do? Huh? Not so simple, huh? Yeah. So the Gabbai for the Chevra Kadisha tells him, come back tomorrow. Come back tomorrow. Okay. The next day, the Gabbai of the Chevra Kadisha goes to the Rav, and he tells the Rav the whole story. And he says, I don't know what to do. He says, and you have to understand, I lost myself and I saw all this money, and now I'm in a predicament. What do I do? The Rav says, don't worry. If he comes again to you, send him to me. All right? Next night, the guy comes to the Gabbai of the Chevra Kadisha, and he says, here I am. So the Gabbai says, go to the Rav. Okay. He goes to the Rav. The Rabbanim don't have an easy time. Look what the Rabbanim have to deal with. Well, we're not going to get into this. Anyways, so he goes to the Rav, and the Rav says, Hazachaim, listen, you know good and well that you're at fault over here. You took out the money. The Gabbai of the Chevra Kadisha lost himself, and therefore he sold you the place. But you really don't deserve it. On the other hand, you bought it. So here's the deal. What we are going to do is, we are going to open up the kever next to the Megala Amukos. If you belong there, go there yourself. We're not going to move you there. We're going to open up the place, and then you have a choice. And the guy said, no problem, I will. The next day, the Rav went to the Chevra Kadisha. They opened up the place. They came back, I guess a day later, whenever it was, and they saw that this guy's Oren is in the place next to the Megala Mukos. So once they saw that, so they obviously closed it all up. Now they have to put a matzeva. They have to put a monument. What do you write? Nobody has any clue who this guy is. I mean, maybe they didn't want a name, but that's about it. So they wrote on it, Yagid Olav Reyoy, which in Hebrew means his neighbor will tell on him who he is. Just like you say in English, tell me who your friends are, I know who you are. The same thing here. Yagid Olav Reyoy. This is the story that Rabbi Nachman brings in his Sefer. There are several versions about the Teises Yom Tov and others. I know about that. But this is the way he has the story that happened with the Megala Mukos. It is amazing that there's a concept that actually the Megala Mukos says, which is connected to this, that's what we are going to be doing today in our shir. Just like you have in the story, the concept of Yagid Olav Reyoy, that your friend tells on you, the Gemara discusses this subject of when you have two people and one is a neighbor or a friend, how one tells on the other. The expression the Gemara is not Yagid Olav Reyoy, but Toiv la Tzadik, Toiv l'Shcheinei. Good is to the tzaddik and good is to his neighbor. And at the same time, says the Gemara, that you have also the opposite expression, which is Oy la Rasha, V'oy l'Shcheinei. Bad is to a Rasha and bad is to his neighbor. These are the two expressions in the Gemara. The Megala Mukos says that what is the Rosh Tevis of Elul? Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed, the month which is devoted to getting close to the Eibishter, preparing for Rosh Hashanah. What is it? Oy la Rasha V'oy l'Shcheinei. And everybody has the question, what is going on over here? How can you call Elul a Rasha? And even to say, Oy la Rasha v'oy l'Shcheinei, who's the Shachan of Elul? Tishrei. How could you do that? So therefore what we're going to do today is discuss an unbelievable thought that the Rebbe explains in Likutei Sichos on the subject of why is Elul called Oy la Rasha v'oy l'Shcheinei. So what we're going to do is we will take one subject and ask a question, then we'll take another question and a third question, and then we are going to have a beautiful puzzle and a most beautiful lesson that we take for the Chodesh of Elul, the month of Elul. So this is all based on Likutei Sichos Chelik Yud Tes. This is the end of that Sikha on page 65. And there's a whole Sikha behind it, as we're going to be discussing briefly what that is. And also Likutei Sichos Chelik Lamed Gimel, page number 10. So let's go directly to our sources, and that is, where do we find in the Torah this concept of Toiv la Rasha v'Toiv l'Shcheinei, Oy la Tzadik v'Oy l'Shcheinei? One of the places is in Parshas Bamidbar. In Parshas Bamidbar it discusses how the Yidden used to travel in the desert. You know, they came from Mitzrayim, they put up the Mishkan, they lived around the Mishkan, and then once in a while the Anon, the cloud would go up, and the cloud would start traveling, and the Yidden all dismantled the Mishkan and dismantled their houses, and they went along together wherever the Mishkan went. How did they camp? Says the pasuk as follows. Look at source number 1, Parshas Bamidbar, Peirik Beis, pasuk Aleph. The Rebbe says as follows. By Daber Hashem al Moshe v'Aaron Leimer. The Rebbe told Moshe and Aaron, and he said as follows. Ish al digloi be'oises leveis avosom. How should the Yidden camp? According to their degel, according to the flag, according to the banner, the insignias that they had, each one for themselves, Yachanu b'nei Yisrael. This is how the Yidden should camp. Mineged, at a distance, Saviv l'oyel moed Yachanu. They should be around the Mishkan. The way it was, the Mishkan was in the center. Shevet Levi was divided into 4 parts. Moshe and Aaron, Gershon, Kahos, and Merari. And the Yidden, were 12 Shvatim, was also divided into 4 parts. 3 in the front, 3 in the back, 3 on the right side, and 3 on the left side. That's what we're going to see now. Go to the next pasuk Gimel. Which were the Shvatim in the east side? Degel, Machane, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun. The 3 Shvatim, the 3 tribes of Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun. Go to source number 2, pasuk Yud. Degel Machane Reuven. Where was the Machane of Reuven? Timona. They were on the south side. And together with him was Shimon and Gad. Reuven, Shimon, and Gad were on the south side. As we said before, the Levim was also divided into 4 parts. Says the Torah, it goes to source number 3, Peirik Gimel Pasuk Lamed Ches. Says the Rebbe, V'achaynim lifnei hamishkan keidma lifnei oyel moed mizracha. Who was on the east side in front of the Mishkan? Moshe ve'Aaron ubanov. Moshe, Aaron, and his children, they were in the front of the Mishkan by the door. Says Rashi, Usmuchin lahem. So who are the tribes that are next to Shevet, next to Moshe, Aaron, and his children? Degel, Machane, Yehuda, Yisachar, Zvulun. Who was close to Moshe Rabbeinu? Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun. Oh, says Rashi, Toiv la tzaddik, Toiv l'shcheinei. It's good to the tzaddik and it's good to his neighbor. Because who was the neighbor of Moshe Rabbeinu? Yisachar and Yehuda. So, says Rashi, Nasu G'dolim b'Torah. They are the ones that became the great people in Torah. As Rashi explains over there the details. But we see that the proximity of Moshe Rabbeinu to these tribes caused Toiv la tzaddik, Toiv l'shcheinei. Good to the tzaddik and good to his neighbor. Let's go to source number 4, the other case. In Perek Gimel Pasuk Chaf Tes, says the Rebbe, Mishpaches b'nei Kehaz, the family of Kehaz, Yachanu al Yerech HaMishkan Teimano. They were on the south side of the Mishkan. Says Rashi, Usmuchim lahem, who was close to Shevet Kehaz, Degel Reuven Achelim Teimano. Reuven, who was on the south side, as we said before in source number 2, that Reuven, Shimon, and Gad were on the south. Says Rashi, over here it's the opposite. Oy la Rasha ve'oy l'shcheinei. Woe is to the Rasha and woe is to his shachan, to his neighbor. Lekach laku mehem dasam v'avirom u'masayim v'chamishim ish im kairach v'adosei. Who was together with Reuven was Kairach and the 150 people, the 250 people that went together with Kairach, and who was in Shevet Reuven, Dasam, Vaviram, etc. They were together with Kairach in their machlokes with Moshe Rabbeinu. So here it's Oila Rasha ve'Oila Shcheinei. So there is no question that at least in the Torah, the way we have the story, Oila Rasha ve'Oila Shcheinei seems to be something very negative. We also find in the Gemara this expression of Oila Rasha ve'Oila Shcheinei. Where do we find it? There's a Siyum in Masechta Sukkah, the end of the tractate of Sukkah. The Gemara over there says the famous story of Miriam Bas Bilga, this unfortunate Jewish girl that she went to the Goyim and she married a Goy. Let's look at the story over here. It's in source number 5, the Siyum of Masechta Sukkah. Sukkah Daf Nun Vav and Beis. Says the Gemara as follows. Tan Rabbanan. Maise ben Miriam Bas Bilga, there was a story with a Miriam Bas Bilga, Shehei Mira Dosa, that she converted. And she went to get married to a Greek officer who was part of the kingdom of the Greeks. When the Yevonim, the Greeks, came into the Beis Hamikdash to destroy it, she took with her sandal and kicked the Mizbeach. And she said to the Mizbeach, she was talking to the Eibishter, Lucas, Lucas, wolf. In other words, he was talking to the Eibishter just like a wolf eats lambs, sheep. She says, Lucas, Lucas, ad mosai ato mechalem amoina shel Yisrael. Till when are you going to consume the money of the Yidden, the property of the Yidden, and you are not there to help them when they need you? Every day you eat these 2 lambs, the carbon tummy, then the other carbonas. You keep on eating up stuff, and where are you when the Yidden needs you? This is how she spoke. When the Chachamim heard such a thing, they locked up her ring and they closed her window. To make a long story short, what we're talking about over here is in the Beis Hamikdash, with the way they used to bring the karbanis, they had a ring. There were 24 rings that were used when they wanted to bring a behemoth, an animal, to do the shchita. They had a ring. They used to bring the animal into the ring, and the ring was locked up so the animal can't move, and then they would do the shchita. There were 24 groups in the Mishkan. There were turns. They used to take turns, these groups. So each one had a ring. So what the Chachamim did, they took the ring that belongs to her family, of her group. They took that ring. That ring was a ring that was sort of a half a ring. So when you turn it one way, there's a space where to bring in the animal. When you turn it the other way, it's locked up on the bottom and it can't move. So what the Chachamim did, they locked up that ring so they can't use it, and they always have to borrow someone else's ring. It was a way how to degrade them. So this was the ring, and they closed her window. There were special windows in the Beis Hamikdash where the Kohanim used to put their chalofim, the knives and stuff, when they finished working. So there were 24 windows. So their group, the window was closed. This is what they... V'yeshayimim, the others say that there was another thing, whatever. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. Leman de Amar Miriam bas Bilgo shehemiro doso. If you're telling me that the reason why they locked up from this group the ring and the window is because of this Miriam bal Bilgo, because she converted. Mishum brate kasinan leledidei. Because of one daughter, you punish the whole group? What's going on here? Amar Abaye in. Abaye says yes. Kede amri inchi. Because people say, there's a famous saying in the Gemara and in those days, when a child says something in the street, obviously he heard it at home. So therefore, if a child could talk like that, that means that her surroundings, her environment is like that. Therefore, they punish the whole group. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. And because of the father and the mother, so we punish the whole group? So we cancel the father and the mother, but not the whole group? Amar Abaye says, Abaye, you're right, but there's a rule. Oy la Rasha ve'oy lishcheinai. Oy to the Rasha, and oy is to his neighbor. And that's why they punished the whole group. On the other hand, says the Gemara, if you're next to a tzaddik, you're all set. What does Rashi say on this? Look at number 6. Rashi, oy la Rasha ve'oy lishcheinai, says Rashi, b'teiras koyanim. And Teiras Kohanim is the equivalent to the Gemara, but it's based on the Chumash. In the one on Vayikra is called Teiras Kohanim. So Teiras Kohanim, over there on the story of Tzaras, of Metzora, when it talks about that if somebody gets a Tzaras, a leprosy, a plague, on his wall of the house, there's a certain case where vechiltzu es avonim. Tanya, we learned in V'teres Kohanim, vechiltzu es avonim. The pasuk said that you have to chisel out the stones. Says Rashi that what happens if naga be'eben shebemiktzaya? What happens if there's a wall which is between two people, and there's a stone, and the stone holds up the wall from both sides, and on one side there is a tzaras? You would think that you have to take out just the place of the tzaras. Says the Rebbe, no, you have to take out the whole stone, even from the side of the neighbor. Says Rashi, Shnei hen cheltzin, both have to take off their stone. Even if the nega was seen on one side of this person, the other one also loses his wall. Why? Says Rashi, Mikan Omru, from here we learn, Oy la Rasha ve'oy lishcheinai. Woe is to the Rasha, and woe is to his neighbor. Umemele, says Rashi, and what do we understand from this? That Teiv la Tzadik, Teiv lishcheinai. That when you're connected to a Tzadik, when you're a neighbor to a Tzadik, everything is good. Teiv la Tzadik, Teiv lishcheinai, de mida Teiva meruba, because goodness is always in a much stronger fashion. So therefore, what we see basically over here is the concept of Oy la Rasha ve'oy lishcheinai. By the way, on this Siyama Masechta Sukkah, the Rebbe spoke many times. There's a beautiful Siyama Masechta in Masechta Sukkah in Chelik Yotes and in different places and Fabrengens. And now we are just going to touch upon one little detail. These words of Oy la Rasha ve'oy lishcheinai, how could you say on Chodesh Elul, the Chodesh HaRachamim, the Chodesh where the Yud Gimel Midas, the 13 attributes of mercy of the Eibishter appear, we're calling it Rasha and calling it Oy la Rasha ve'oy lishcheinai. So what we're going to do is, we're going to analyze now Chodesh Elul. What is this Chodesh Elul? Every little child knows that Chodesh Elul has different Rasha Tevis and different words that come out of the letters Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed of Elul. The most famous one is Ani Ledoidi Vedoidili. However, there are 5 basic Rasha Tevis for Elul, because they represent the basic avoida, the basic spiritual work and devotion that a person has to do in Elul. First are the 3 of Torah, Aveda, and Gmilas Chasadim. The learning of Torah, Aveda, which is Aveda Satfila, and Gmilas Chasadim, doing acts of kindness. The 4th one is Tshuva, returning to the Eibishter, what's called in English repentance, but that's wrong. Tshuva means returning. And the 5th one goes on the Geula, the redemption that the Eibishter is going to give. And all of them, all these 5 are in the word Elul. Look at source number 7. The first one is Ani ledoidi vedoidi li, which goes on Tefillah, Aveda, on davening, which means me, a person, to his beloved, which is the Eibishter, and the beloved to the person, which is the concept of davening, where we get connected to the Eibishter. Then number 8 is one of Torah, Ino leyodoi v'samti loch, which is a pasuk In Pasha Mishpatim, where the Rebbe says, what happens if a person by mistake killed somebody? The Rebbe is the one that made it happen because it was an accident. Says the Rebbe, I'm going to give you a city of refuge where you could go over there. The whole story of Bar Miklat, we're not going to get into that. And the Gemara says, the Divrei Torah Koltin. The words of Torah are like a refuge. So we have Tefillah, Torah, and then you have Gebulas Chasadim, acts of kindness, of goodness and kindness, and that is what we have in the Megillah, the concept of Mishloach Monos. In the Megillah it says, Umishloach Monos, how do you give the presents? Ish Lere'ehu, Umatonos Loivyonim, a person to his friend, and presents to the poor. That is Ish Lere'ehu, Umatonos Loivyonim, is Elul. Then we have Tshuva, where the Rebbe says, Umal Hashem Elekecha es levavcha ves levav zarecha. The Rebbe is going to do a milah. He's going to sort of chop off, take care of your heart. Es levavcha, your heart, ves levav zarecha, and the heart of your children, to be able to get closer to the Rebbe. So es levavcha, ve'es levav. These 4 words make the word Elul, like you see in your number 10, and ultimately number 11, on the Geula, the final redemption, it says that Oz Yoshir Moshe Rabbeinu sang to the Eibishter when they went over the Yamsuf. And over there, it doesn't say Moshe Rabbeinu sang, it says Oz Yoshir, he will sing, which is when Mashiach will come. And it says in the first pasuk, Vayoimru Leimoir, and they said as follows, Ashira Lashem ki goy goy, I will sing to the Eibishter because he's very great. The 4 words, Ashira LaHashem, Vayoimru Leimoir, are the words Elul. These are the famous 5 Rashi Tevasin for Elul, which take care of the Avodah of a Jew. However, these are the most famous ones, but there are plenty more Rashi Tevasin. I'm not going to bring them all because we don't have the time to go through it, but I will just bring one Megala Amukais, as we mentioned before, the story of the Megala Amukais, where he brings 2 or 3 more, and some that have to do with the Goyim, etc. Very, very fascinating. And he is the one that brings that Elul is as we're going to see. Go to source number 12, Megala Amukais, and as I said before, he was Reb Nosson Nata Shapira, over 400 years ago, the teacher of the Shach. He says on Parshas Eikev always comes out towards Elul, so he has a whole section on Elul, and it says as follows. Source number 12, Elul, Sheyihye leYisrael, the Yidden should finally merit to have Aron, the famous ark which you had in the Beis Hamikdash, Luchos, and the tablets, V'shivre Luchos, and also the broken tablets. In other words, we should have back the Beis Hamikdash, Ashlishi, the 3rd Beis Hamikdash, take it from Yad Mamish. So what's Elul? Aron, Luchos, V'shivre Luchos. That's Elul. Now, why Dafke the Luchos and Shivre Luchos? We're not going to get into that. We'll leave that for a different time. But that's what he says is Rosh Hashanah Elul. Then he continues on and on. Then he says, "V'nevad chodesh min Esav," and this chodesh was lost from Esav. We'll discuss that soon in another few minutes. And therefore, because it was lost from Esav, what is his Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed? Oy larasha ve'oy lishchena, because this has to do with Esav. So the question is, as we said before, what's this Oy larasha ve'oy lishchena? And then he continues. Bireshayim shesas HaMakadosh Baruch Hu es Liban milasis tshuva. The Reshayim, the Rebbe closes their heart from doing tshuva. He's basically talking about the goyim who deserve to get punished. Like it says by Paroi, the Rebbe says, Ki ani hichbadeti, I made hard, strong, es liboy v'esleiv avodav, his heart and the heart of his servants. Es liboy ve'es leiv is Elul. So we have a Elul that the Rebbe closes the heart of the goyim. Aval b'Yisrael, by the Yidden, it's exactly the opposite as we had before in source number 10. What does it say by the Yidden? Umal Hashem Elekecha es levavcha ves levav zarecha. That the Rebbe will give the Yidden a chance to do tshuva es levavcha ves levav. And then how does he end off the Megala Mukos? Uval etzion goyel uleshavei fesha b'Yaakov. That the Rebbe should finally send the redemption. Goyel. The last 2 letters are El, Aleph Lamed, and Uleshavei. The first 2 letters are Vav Lamed, which spells the word Elul, as we say every single day in the morning in Uval Etzion. But the bottom line is, what do we see over here? That he says that what is Elul? Oy larasha ve'oy lishchena. So we need to understand. We just learned in the Gemara in Sukkah, and we just learned in the Chumash that Elul is something which is that Oila Rosh of Oila Shcheinai is something which is negative. How could the Megala Mukes come and say that Chodesh Elul is Oila Rosh of Oila Shcheinai? Question number 1. Let's go now to question number 2, and then we will come back to the puzzle. Don't worry, we have also a question number 3. Okay, but let's go to question number 2. If we go to source number 13, we see that there's a Gemara. The Gemara is in Tainis, towards the end, the Daf Chav Tes Amud Aleph, and the Gemara says as follows. Amar Rav Yehuda Breid Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas Mishmei de Rav. Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel Bar Shilas, said in the name of Rav, Keshem shemishnichnas Av mematim besimcha. Just like when the month of Av comes in, the month of Menachem Av comes in, we diminish in simcha, in joy. Kach, the same way, mishnichnas Adar marbim besimcha. The same way, when Adar comes in, what do? We are marbim besimcha. We add in our joy. And the Gemara continues, Omar of Papa, later, Hilkach, therefore, because the month of Mematin Besimcha, we diminish Simcha. Why? Because there's epistimtnis, something is no good. Says Rav Papa, Hilkach, Bar Yisrael, the Islay Dine Bahad Yevet Kechavim, a Yid that has a court case together with a Goy, Lahavdil, if this is in the month of Av, he should try to avoid it. Why? Because the mazel of a Yid is not so good in the month of Av. This is what the Gemara says. Comes the Magen Avram. The Magen Avram is one of the Mefarshim on the Shulchan Aruch, one of the biggest poskim. And what does he say? Look at source number 14. The Magen Avram in Hilchus Tisha B'Av. You see him in Tov Kuf Nun Aleph Sif Beis on the words of the Shulchan Aruch, Lishtamit Minei, that he should try to avoid to have a court case. In Av, says the Magen Avram, Ad Rosh Chodesh Elul, until Rosh Chodesh Elul. In other words, the whole month of Av. Why is he saying that? Because the Gemara says that just like Adar, just like Av, we diminish the Simcha, so to an Adar we have to add in Simcha. And by Adar it's the whole month. So by Pashtus, Av is also the whole month. Comes the Karban Nesanel. Look at the source number 15. The Karban Nesanel, he is a commentary on the Rosh. The Rosh was the father of the Balaturim, the Tur. The Tur is the source of where the Shulchan Aruch wrote his commentary on the Tur, and then later made the Shulchan Aruch. So he was, before the Shulchan Aruch, the Karban Nesanel. The Karban Nesanel was later, but he's on the Rosh, and he writes as follows. That this is the Lashon of the Magen Avram. What does the Magen Avram say? That if somebody has a court case with a Goy in Chodesh Av, till when? Lishtamit Minei, Ad Rosh Chodesh Elul. The Magen Avram says till Rosh Chodesh Elul. Vani Omer, comes the Karban Nesanel, say, I said no. Milishna the Gemara, from the Sutta Gemara over there in Tainis, I'm not going to go now through the details, but he manages to pull out from the Gemara that Adarabe, Mashme ad le'achar tez be'av bilchud. This means only after Tisha B'Av, but till Tisha B'Av. But after Tisha B'Av, there's no problem. This is what the Karban Nesanel says. So we see that it's not the whole month, it's only till Tisha B'Av. So the question is, where did the Karban Nesanel take this from? That it's only until Tisha B'Av. So, and we have to understand what happened over here. That first we say that it's a whole month, then we say no, it's only 3/4 of the month. What is going on here? Question number 2. Now we're going to go to question number 3, which we're going to learn as Zohar, which is seemingly a very strange Zohar, and according to this, we will understand the whole story. Let's look at what the Zohar says in Parshas Yisro. When he talks about the whole story of Matan Torah in source number 16, he says something very interesting. The Torah was given, as the Torah says, in the 3rd month that the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, that's when they got the Torah. The Torah doesn't say Chodesh Sivan. The Torah says Chodesh HaShlishi, the 3rd month. Ask the Zohar, what's this Shlishi? So the Zohar gives here a whole lengthy story. I'm just going to give you the nutshell, then we're going to see the few words inside. The Yidden are the grandchildren of Yaakov Avinu. The way the Rebbe set it up is that the first 3 months of the summer months, which is Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, belong to Yaakov Avinu. The next 3 months, Tammuz, Av, Elul, belong to Esav. And there were twins in the mother's stomach. That is why we see the first 3 months was all connected to Torah. Yaakov Ishtam, Yaakov was the one who was learning Torah. Tammuz of, we have those bad things like the Churban Beis Hamikdash, that is Esav, etc. So these are the 3 months and the 3 months. Totally unrelated to the Zohar doesn't discuss it here, but just as a very interesting point, the Rebbe's father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, has a very interesting, long explanation that the summer months are the part where the Rebbe gave Nigla the Torah, the revealed part of Torah. That's why in the 3rd month of the summer months, that's when Matan Torah was. In the winter time, in the 3rd month, which is Kislev, that was when the Rebbe gave Pnimius Torah, the inner part of Torah, the esoteric part of Torah, and that is why Yutas Kislev is in the 3rd month, because that's when we have Kabbalah Satira of Pnimius Satira. But we're not going to get into that right now. But at least we see over here that the Zohar makes it very clear that the 6 summer months, 3 are Yaakov and 3 are Esav. Says the Zohar as follows. Number 16. This is what the Torah says. When Rivka was carrying her 2 children, the normal explanation for twins is in the Torah, Te'oimim. And here the Torah says Toimim without an Aleph. Soimim bevitno. There's something missing here. And the Zohar explains that the Aleph is there to show something very interesting. That we didn't have twins over here. The twins weren't Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov and Esav are not twins. Yaakov is a tzaddik, Esav is a rasha. These are not twins. The twins is, Yaakov is the one who represents the twins, and Esav falls on the side. That's what the Torah wrote it in a strange way, Toimim, to show that it's not your regular kind of twins. We're talking about Yaakov himself. And as the Zohar will explain, it's because Yaakov includes in himself Avraham and Yitzchak. Very briefly, as you all know, Avraham is Chesed, Yitzchak is Gvura, and Kabbalistically, Chesed is on the right, Gvura is on the left. The 3rd one, Tiferes is in the center. Tiferes, the beauty, includes in itself Chesed and Gvura. Yaakov included in himself Avraham and Yitzchak. That's what the 1st month belongs to Avraham, the 2nd month belongs to Yitzchak, the 3rd month, Shlishi, belongs to Yaakov, which is the mazel of Te'oimim, the mazel of twins, the horoscope, etc. So therefore, let's look at it in the, it's a long concept, but I just want to get to the point of Elul here. Look again in source number 16. And this is why the Torah writes, when Yaakov and Esav were in the stomach of the mother, soimim bevitno, not teoimim, twins, without an aleph, because Yaakov notil berozo delay, trein yarchin. Yaakov took 2 months, which ones? Nisan and Iyar, which are Keneged Avraham and Yitzchak. Chesed and Gvura. Veiskalil ihu berozo de Sivan, and he encompasses everything in the 3rd month, in the month of Sivan, which is the mazel of Te'oimim. However, Esav, notil berozo delay, trein yarchin Tammuz ve'ov. He took the 2 months of Tammuz and Av, which are Netzach and Heid. I'm not going to go now through the whole thing. Ve'ihu leishtakach v'sabit. But he doesn't represent anything because he got lost. So therefore, Elul is not Esav. Esav is gone. Deho Elul lav dilehu. Elul doesn't belong to him. He doesn't represent anything. Ve'afilu Av, and even the month of Av, tes yoimin inu delay. The first 9 days are his. V'lo yatir, and not more than that. And therefore he got lost and you can't find him. He is not part of the Te'oimim story that the Rebbe says by Rivka. He went astray on his own. He went to a total different place. Which means that since the way it works is that each one, Yaakov and Esav, both should have been representing 2 before him, and then he is the 3rd. So Yaakov did that. Yaakov represents Avraham and Yitzchak. So therefore, the 3rd month, the Rebbe gave the Torah to his grandchildren. Esav took off. He went away from Avraham and Yitzchak. He doesn't belong to any of them. So therefore, he's gone. So the 2 that he was supposed to represent, he only got Tammuz and Av, but Elul, which he was supposed to represent, is totally lost. So we see something very different between Elul and Av. Elul, Esav didn't get at all. Av, he got partially. So we have to understand, what is this business that he didn't get Elul, and he got Av only partially? The story is a bit, needs a little bit more explanation. So now let's re-summarize here. What we need to understand here is, number 1, why is Elul called Oil Rasha v'Oil Shcheinai? So now we understand at least the connection to the Rasha to Esav, but we need to understand what does this mean. And second of all, what is this business that he only got 9 days but not the whole month? And the Korban Nesanel makes it very clear, and he actually brings this Zohar. So we have to understand why, if he already got the 9 days, why didn't he get the whole month, or why did he get only 2 quarters? What happened over here exactly? So therefore what we're going to do is, we're going to go now and analyze this expression of Oy l'Rasha v'Oy l'Shchenei, and then we're going to see a beautiful Chodesh Elul, which is going to give us a much deeper insight than the Elul that we learned until we knew that he was called a Rasha. Okay, so let's analyze the word Oy. Oy l'Rasha v'Oy l'Shchenei. What does Oy mean? Is Oy a word? Is Oy a word? Oy is an expression. It's not a word. What do we say on the positive side? Toiv latzadik, toiv l'shchenei. It's good to the tzaddik, good for his neighbor. Toiv. What's the opposite? When we want to talk about a rasha, not a tzaddik, what are we supposed to say? Ra lo rasha, ra l'shchenei. It's bad to be a rasha, and it's bad for his shachan. No, we don't say that. We say Oy la rasha. What's this Oy business? Why doesn't it say a word? Ra la rasha, ra l'shchenei. That means that the Rebbe wants to say something here with this Oy. What's this Oy? There's a lot of interesting midrashim on it, etc. We just don't have enough time, so we're just going to go to the bottom line here of the Oy of Elul. Garelik. Let's go like this. Go to source number 17. There's a Maimer from the Frierdiker Rebbe, Tafresh Tzadik Ches, 1938. Beautiful Maimer. And he says as follows in this Maimer. It's on page Tezvav, page 15 in Tzadik Ches. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, HaTshuva de Rosh Hashanah. What is the concept of tshuva that we do on Rosh Hashanah? Ima yoyisa tshuva klalis. Even though it's a tshuva, a general tshuva, a person on Rosh Hashanah, he gets serious, he thinks back and he wants to return, and then all the things that he has to have to be fixed. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, there's a system here how tshuva happens. Mikol makom hi bo betza'akas hakoil dafka. It's not just a thought, you sit and think and you contemplate. There has to be, it's like a voice, there has to be some sound here. The mitzvah hayom de Rosh Hashanah. What's the mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah? Hitkiyat shofar. We blow. V'yodua. The mitzvah shofar bekavonos haruchnis. What's the concept of the blow? Beruchnis, in the spiritual, the deep sense of the shofar. It's not just time we take a trumpet to blow. Hu inyan hatshuva. That is the concept of tshuva. And what's the main thing of the shofar? The voice, which means it's a combination here. We need on Rosh Hashanah 2 things. We need tshuva and koil. We need koil and tshuva, voice and tshuva together. And that is what the whole shofar is all about. Therefore, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, I'm not quoting the whole lashon over there because the Maimer is long, beautiful. I'm just going to say what's negeh to us. Koil harishon hutkiya. What's the first blow? It's atkiya. The first kiya means a very straight sound. Then later come all the other different types of sounds. But the first thing is that one krech that the person does. The Frierdiker Rebbe is going to give a beautiful example, a physical. What we see physically by a person. When a person gets in an unbelievable is'oirus, he gets like an awakening to do something. That comes from something that really penetrates him, which is so important to him, and it really hits him inside. How does a person let it out when he all of a sudden hears something unbelievable? Says the Rebbe, he does it he does it from the inside. Let's say chas v'shalom, someone hears a tragedy happen either to him or chas v'shalom or to a friend. What's his first expression? Oy! That oy! It comes from the inside of a person. Says the Rebbe, it's that oy that a person does. That's where the nefesh, the soul of a person bursts out with that one. It can't even put it into words. It just comes as a expression. This expression, every expression has to have some kind of letters to it. A lot of times you look at it in the comics, they have all these type of the expressions, or they try to attach letters to noises. Okay, yeah, so to a sigh, to a this, or to that, or whatever it is. So therefore says the Frierdiker Rebbe in Torah, in which letters is this expression spelled out? It comes up with the letter Aleph and Yud, and then there's a beautiful Maimer from the Tzemach Tzedek in Eira Torah based on a Zohar, where he explains that it's the Aleph Vav Yud. Here the Frierdiker Rebbe doesn't go into all the details, but the word Oy, the expression Oy, is that Se'aka that comes from the deepness of the hearts of a person. So what is the idea of Oy? Oy is the concept of tshuva, when a person sees that he did something wrong or something wrong happened, and he just lets out this outburst. That is Oy. Oh, that's what Oy is. Now we will understand the whole story. Let's go see what the Rebbe tells us here in Likutei Sichos. Go see source number 18. Der Pirush von Oy l'Rosha ve'Oy l'Shcheinu n'Avedas Adam. What does the concept of Oy l'Rosha ve'Oy l'Shcheinu mean in a person's avodah? Says the Rebbe, der Bitui Oy, the expression Oy, Vaistev Tsar, shows on pain, hurt. Unazevi mezet b'teva b'nei Adam, just like we see where somebody naturally. As wenn a Mensch gefindt sich in tiefen Tsar, when a person finds himself in a very uncomfortable situation, in a very bitter situation, in dem Oi, it expressed in the cry Oi. Und in the Tsar von Avedes, and when somebody feels bad because of an Aveda, it is Aveda Tshuva. This is the Aveda of Tshuva. Was poil die Schwere und Bittel von dem Ra. This causes the breaking, the destroying of the wickedness. But the Rebbe is not interested in destroying the person. The Rebbe wants the person should destroy the wicked part which is in him. And there was a famous letter from the Rebbe that people were saying that the Chassidim are against Zionism. Zionists, etc. And the Rebbe said, Chas v'sholem, the Chassidim, nobody's against any people, nobody's against any Zionist. There's a subject which is called Zionism, and we have to analyze what that is. But nobody's Chas v'sholem against any Zionists, and nobody's against any person. What we want is that if the person has a certain idea which is wrong, we go after the idea and explain it to him. But we love every single person. And the same thing is over here. When a person sees that he did something wrong, so he has tsar, so with that he doesn't break the person, he breaks the evilness that brought him to do this concept. Und das sind die zwei Inyanim, and these are the two processes that we need in order to refine a person. Oy l'Rasha, the first one, which is Oy l'Rasha, is the Shvire von Ra, the breaking of the Ra, the breaking of the wickedness. Das heißt, the Aveda Fusur Meira. As we know, the Pasuk says in Tehillim that we have not two options, but it's two processes. The first one is Sur Meira, you go away from the bad, and then Vasei Toiv, and then you could do the good. That is basically the transition from a person from a Rasha to become a Tzaddik. So therefore says the Rebbe, Oy l'Rasha is the Shvire von der Ra. Das heißt the Aveda Fusur Meira, the Aveda of going away from the bad. Ubenefesh, what is this in the soul of a person? Der Inyan fu Merirus v'keved Reish. When a person finally has that bitterness, that humility, that he did something wrong, that will eventually bring him to the next level, which is Untayv la Tzadik, is the Aveda von Asei Toiv, is the Aveda of doing the positive, ubenefesh the kav von simcha. And what is it in the soul, in the nefesh, beruchnis, in spiritual sense, that after the bitterness comes the simcha, comes the joy, that Baruch Hashem, we got rid of that evil, of the wickedness, and now we could be a proper servant of the Eibishter. Says the Rebbe, b'shas hayid poiled by zich beide inyanim, when a Jew manages to accomplish these both steps, so this poiled us euch oi lishcheinoi, oi l'Rasha. The Rasha screams out oi, and he gets rid of his bad habits. Oy lishchenoi. What he is going to accomplish is also the breaking of the bad in his shachen, the sur meira b'shchenoi. And eventually that will bring un toiv lishchenoi, then vasei toiv from the shachen. So in other words, with the oil rasha is not the evil part, the negative part. It's fakert, that when a person unfortunately realizes that he is not a tzaddik, he's a rasha, then what that brings out is the oil rasha, that breaks that rasha, that wicked part which is in him, and eventually oil shchena, he'll also be able to accomplish that oil on his neighbor, because a person looks at his neighbors and they take from each other, and then they both will become toiv la tzaddik, toiv l'shchena. That's why we don't say the expression ra la rasha. We talk about the positive, oy la rasha, the tshuva that the rasha does, which is breaking the ra. And the Rebbe finishes off, look at number 19, and the same thing is in Chodesh Elul. Oila Rasha, what is Oila Rasha? As we said before, it means the breaking, the Shvira Sarah, durch the Tshuva for Chodesh Elul. Chodesh Elul is the month which is devoted to Tshuva. So therefore, what does he do? He does the Oila Rasha. He breaks the rasha, which breaks as I said, the evil part of the rasha. And what does oil shchena mean? That he breaks of his neighbor. Who is the neighbor of Elul? It also does it on his neighbor. Who is his neighbor? Zman hasamuch, the time which is next to Elul. Chodesh Av. So in other words, the reason why Esav didn't have Chodesh Elul, because Chodesh Elul is devoted to tshuva. And Esav has nothing to do with that, so Chodesh Elul belongs only to the Yidden. For what purpose? To do tshuva. Oy la rasha, to break the ra, which is in the opposite of a tzaddik. And eventually that also has an effect on shchenei, on Av. And therefore this did to Av, that now the month of Av is a mixture. It's not completely to Esav, it's only partial. And not only that, continues the Rebbe, and the Rebbe, and therefore is Oila Rasha Merames Eichav Chodesh Elul Gufa, that the Oila Rasha shows on Elul, as we said before, Demol zu brecht men dem Ra, Verasha Meikari, then we break the Ra, we transform the Rasha, that he should become a tzaddik. So when we transform it, what happens? So therefore, we don't give the rasha any grip into this time, because it's all devoted to tshuva, and therefore Esav has nothing to do with the month of Elul. Even though Elul should have belonged to Esav, but because Esav doesn't have this whole concept of tshuva as the Megala Mukas brought before, and therefore the whole Elul was taken away from Esav totally. Un oili shchenei, wie der Zman von Elul poilt shvira sarah, euch in shchenei, how the time of Elul accomplishes the breaking of the ra in his neighbor. Who's his neighbor? As euch b'chodesh Av is fun Tisha B'av ve'elech mis avid v'le mishtakech, that from Tisha B'av and on he is totally lost. Aber der Tachlis von Shvira Sarah ist doch, but what's the ultimate goal? As es aus durch dem zukommen ein Sofa euch in Asei Toiv in Gilui Eir, that the Ra should all turn into Toiv, the whole thing. So therefore what happens? What is the name of Chodesh Av? It used to be called Av. Then the month of Av got another name, which is Menachem Av, which is the concept of Nechama, where the Rebbe consoles the Yidden, where the month is where we start, although we still have some negative left to it, but what do we call it? We call it Menachem Av. Und durch dem geht man rein Chodesh Elul, Chodesh Arachamim. And from this we go into Chodesh Elul, and in the month of, which is Rachamim, which is the mercy, etc. from the. So now we understand that we're not talking about the negative. If we were talking about the negative, it would be Ra lo Rasha v'Ra l'Shchena. No, that's not what we're saying. Oil Rasha v'Lishchena is when somebody Chalila, he sees that he's on the lowest level, comes the Rebbe and says, Oil Rasha. The Rasha has a chance to do tshuva, oy, and by doing that, he will eventually be able to come to the level of Toiv la Tzaddik v'Toiv l'Shchena. Where do we see this? That maybe when a person is a Rasha, he has to. How do we know that this is how the Rebbe set up the system. Maybe a Rasha, sometimes he's a Rasha and he just remains a Rasha. Nah, this is in the olden days, that's how it was when they saw a Jew who Nebuch was a Rasha, he was Mechal Shabbos Chas v'Shalom, or did an Aveda, he was discarded. Before the Alter Baal Shem Tov, before the Alter Rebbe. Unfortunately, this was the system. Any Jew who went off the track or did anything wrong was out. Came the Baal Shem Tov and said, no, every single Yid is a neshama, every single Yid has a soul. We're talking about a Rasha? There's a system here. What's the system? Let's go to number 20. What Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, in Perek Chav Zayin, Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in chapter 27, which is one of the foundations of Torah Chassidus, but it's all based on, what does Alter Rebbe say? I'm not saying now the whole Perek, learn the whole Perek, it's amazing. But Alter Rebbe says, V'zeu shomer HaKosov, that's what the Pasuk says in Mishlei Perek Tezayin, Pasuk Dalet. Kol poyal Hashem lemanehu. Everything that the Rebbe created was for his own sake. Everything that the Rebbe created was for the Rebbe, for his own pride. This was the Rebbe, this was the system that he set up. V'gam Rosha liyayim ra. Even a Rosha, on the day that he's bad, the Rebbe created for him. Comes Alter Rebbe says, how is that possible? The Rebbe created a Rosha. Says Alter Rebbe, yes, Pirush. What is the idea? V'gam Rosha liyayim ra. The pasuk doesn't say v'gam Rosha and also Rosha when he will do something bad. Keshe yasera. V'gam Rosha leyom ra. The Rosha on the day when he will do the bad thing, says Alter Rebbe Pirush, sheyashuv merishoi, that he will come back, he will return from his bad habits. V'yaseh hara sheloi yoim. He will turn the Ra, the bad part of him, he'll turn it to Yoim. What is Yoim? Says the Pasuk in Torah, Vayikra Elokim la'oir Yoim. Yoim means light. Says the Alter Rebbe, Yoim ve'oir l'mayla. This is how the Rebbe created the world, believe it or not. That first there's Galus, and then there's Geula. First comes the negative, and then comes the positive. This is how the Rebbe set up the system. What the Rebbe wants, that a person in this negative world, in this world which when you walk out you don't see any elikus. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. The Rebbe wants that we should be megale, we should reveal the elikus, the godliness. And this is the whole tachlis. And therefore a whole year round we're busy. Comes the month of Elul, says the Rebbe, all of a sudden you give a look back and you see, what did I just do this year? And I am not where I'm supposed to be, even if I didn't do anything so terrible, but I'm definitely not where I'm supposed to be. So what should that bring out? Oi. And what do we do with that? By that expression itself breaks that evil. And as the Rebbe says in Hayom Yom, as the krech shfunayid, even just the sigh of a Jew breaks all barriers. And this is what we learn from Chodesh Elul. Everybody's used to hearing the Chodesh Elul is Torah, Avodah, Gmilut Chasadim, Tshuva, Geula, all these great things, 100%. But this is ready for someone who's into the system. And now he has to see where he has to perfection himself. But Chodesh Elul has a much deeper concept. And the concept is when Chas v'Shalom there's a Yid who unfortunately was not where he should be. And he thinks, I'm an outcast, I'm finished, I have nothing worth. Comes Chodesh Elul and says, no, just from the mere fact that you say that I am a nothing, I am not where I'm supposed to be, that krech, that puts you into the mood of Elul, Oil Rasha, and this will cause that Oil Shcheina when the people around him, when they see a person becomes better than what he used to, that alone gives them a pride, and Tov Latzadik Shev L'Shcheina, and then he will be able to even affect on his surroundings, and the person will turn into a most beautiful thing. And this is what we need to take a Chodesh Elul to get rid of those unfortunate things that get us not to do the right things. And of course, we're not talking chas v'shalom about breaking the body. Some people, they fast and they do, no, absolutely. Chassidus says exactly how to do that. But now we understand what the concept of Elul is, to bring out the potential which is in each person. And nobody should give up. Elul is there to say, go for it. We're going to be able to make it. And then by the time Rosh Hashanah comes around, we are going to blow the shofar, and blowing the shofar shows on the concept of nitzachon, the concept of winning the war. And as we say in English, it's all in the name. It's in Chodesh Elul. Oy lo rasha. This is a message to the one who thinks that he's lost. And as it says, that Yisrael oisin tshuva, umiyad hein nigalim. When the Yidden do the tshuva, miyad hein nigalim, they will right away go out of Galus. And therefore, through all our beautiful work of doing whatever we can in our possibilities, we will definitely be zeicha that we're going to have a shana tova umsuka, that we're going to have a very, very good and sweet year. And we're going to be in the Beis Hamikdash Ashlishi, take it from Yad Mamish, and we'll be able to go straight to the Beis Hamikdash as the Megala Mukas told us. What is Elul? The Rosh Tevis of Or and Luchas and Shivre Luchas. We're going to have back the Beis Hamikdash. So, we're all ready. Any questions? Yeah. Yagid Olav Reyo, that we said before? Yeah. Yagid Olav Reyo, the pasuk that says over there on the Matzeva by the Megala Mukas, Yagid Olav Reyo is a pasuk. It's a pasuk in Iyov. And the Gemara, it's called Toivla Tzadik, Toivla Shchena, Oila Rosha, Oila Shchena. That's already a lashon of the Gemara. But again, the main point over here is that it's not a negative concept, Oila Rosha, Oila Shchena. It's there to take away the negativity. It's the first step. In order to get rid of the negative is Oila Rosha, Oila Shchena. First is Sur Meirah, you get rid of the bad. And then Toivla Tzadik, Toivla Shchena. The best.